Hello, this is John Klein with the Office of Information Technology Shared Services Division, and this is the raw footage of a video demonstrating both the migration of hosts from the PXE environment used by Web-kickstart. Many of you may have used it. You get a giant OIT logo and you type server 6 or server 5. In order to boot from the network and install your operating system. When we migrate to Foreman, the intention is that you won't have to change anything in BlueCat. The IP address management system, you will be able to leave that set to PXE all, and as you enter new hosts into the Foreman build system, it will manage things so that you no longer get the Web-kickstart look and feel, but you get the Foreman look and feel. So I have a test host here. I'm going to use my enormous font to demonstrate that when I reboot this host and boot off the network, that it's getting a similar screen. It's slow because of the HTML5 rendering of the web-based console, but it's actually booted and shown up. This is the analog to what you would normally see on a host connected to PXE all. This is a test host, but basically it's getting the same config files copied from AFS into the new Foreman TFTP server so that we can support a more gradual transition. You don't have a particular date whereby the PXE all template is going to die. So that being said, on this same host, I'm going to go into the new build environment, and I am going to create this host in Foreman. Relatively straightforward. Go to hosts, create hosts, and typey. I've already done a CSI test 1, so I will now follow on with CSI test 2. I've logged in as admin for the purposes of forcing myself to fill out all of the forms. With the full role-based administration that we hope to have someday, it will narrow your choices down to just those that are applicable, and this will make data entry a lot simpler. For example, if I logged in with my JA Klein account, I would only be able to see OIT Linux, so it would know that my organization was always OIT Linux, and I wouldn't have to fill it out. You can create host groups under your organization. These values of which puppet master and which puppet CA do you want to use, you inherit those as default settings, but anything you can redefine and override and use your own. So if you don't want to use the puppet master that we provide and you bring up your own puppet master, we can exchange some OAuth keys and you'll be able to go do whatever you care to. I, of course, do want to start off on the new open source Puppet 4 server. To assign a role to a node, and this can be done at the host group or host level. As I say, I've done extra data or disabled things so that I'll have to do all the data entry so I can demonstrate this. In my OIT Linux organization, there's a number of roles. Any other roles that I have permission to, either at the NCSU level or if I'm collaborating with a colleague in another organization, I could get all that. Actually, I believe you're going to see everything that everybody has, which should lead to some puppet envy, but as I say, this is the raw footage, so I will probably have to keep my sense of humor out of here. I'm just going to pick mirror server because I don't have generic test server, but this is how the role is associated with a host or a host group or whatever. You'll get a GUI and you just pick. Interfaces is pretty much the same drill as always, whether you type it into a kickstart config file in AFS, whether you put it into a Foreman server, whatever you do, you've got to identify the networking information because we don't have automatic IPAM integration. So I'll put the MAC address so that when we PXE boot it, it knows which one is which. I'm going to pick, again, because I haven't narrowed it down, I'm going to pick my domain. And just as a side effect of how things are going to be, in the list of subnets, in the list of subnets, I have associated various domains. There's some domains that, for historical reasons, we use acs.ncsu.edu or et.ncsu.edu, but they are constrained to only a few networks. And so if I'm building a .acs.ncsu.edu host, there's no need for it to show me anything that isn't associated with that subnet. In our test environment, it's small enough that the only VLAN that is associated with oit.ncsu.edu directly is in fact the one where I'm going to put this test host. So that got filled out automatically. This will be much longer for OIT staff in production because we have servers in many subnets. If you're a department that has, one or two or three subnets that you typically support because you have one or two or three floors or buildings or areas, then this is the kind of data entry that will get simpler. And I believe I have over-labored that point, but now I know you know. So the MAC address and the IP address, and basically which subnet, because that tells it which TFTP entry it needs to manage. Again, if you can configure all these to say it's in the host group, I know that my WordPress servers are always going to be CentOS version Mumble. You can have the operating system all set up. Here I'm going to enter every form so you can see the sorts of things, but there's not a lot of choices. If you're going to install Red Hat 7.4, basically your choice is satellite. We've got just the one partition table, and I have not established these as my organization default, so it does display. And here I need to put an installation password. At least in OIT, Puppet is going to synchronize our passwords when it runs so that we can change them, every month. But I have an install password, so if something goes horribly wrong and Puppet doesn't run, at least I can get into the box and do some sort of a postmortem. Again, same dead horse. We are receiving a number of settings from at the organization level, and so things like our super secret activation keys for satellite and all that sort of stuff I get. If I'm doing a project and I want to not use the default activation key, I can override that, and it will let me override or anything. I can, of course, add additional parameters if I want to control it. The important thing is I get what I need to work, which for me is I need a license key in order to license the Red Hat operating system, and I need a proxy in order to get out to the internet. And so by my choice of subnet, it has identified which proxy needs to be used and set that up so that I get a functional operating system when this is done. The last thing, which will probably trip some people up in real life, the role-based administration is basically based on organizations and owners and that sort of stuff. So basically, I can see with my normal account only those hosts which are owned by the organization that I'm in. So, and then I guess that's called user group on this panel. But anyway, my group, I can only see my group's hosts. And of course I can see hosts that are owned by just me. So if I don't actually set this new host up to be owned by the organization, it defaults, unfortunately, to just me, which would make me on call forever because nobody else in my group could see this host or manage it or do anything. So we're going to have to emphasize in training that, yeah, you do need to set the who it's owned by, because that directly affects who can manage it from Foreman. All right. So now that that's done, because it's a brand new host and because I've entered all the required information, I go right into a build state, which means it's told the PXE server to instead of booting the screen where it prompts me what do you want to do, it now says, well, in Foreman it told me to install Red Hat 7.2. I'm in build mode. I need to go ahead and do that. And now I can demonstrate that if I hit Control-Alt-Delete on my host and I hit Escape and I network boot, instead of getting to the big OIT logo and typing something like Red Hat 7.4, or I'm sorry, Server 7.4 would be our convention, it actually knows from Foreman that I need to do an install, and so it's booting with no interaction the 7.4 installer. It's going to get the kickstart file, which has things in it like the password that I identified, the partition table. It will install Puppet and point it to the Puppet Master that I've specified, all that sort of stuff. It's also going to register to the Puppet Master because we have a indelible record here on where is, I don't know if I actually can do this. Yes. So because I created this host, and because it's going to be associated with my actual account, we don't have to go sign the certificates and look at the certificate server to have the record of who signed what. We've got it. It's all in one place. It can go to Splunk. If you build a, I don't know what build crimes you can commit, but if you do commit a build crime, S&C will get that in the Splunk logs, and they will hunt you down appropriately. So I shan't go through and show you the joy of a kickstart installing a bunch of packages and doing yum updates, but that concludes the raw footage that I will edit down hopefully someday to demonstrate how one would introduce a new host in the new build environment, given that you were starting from Web-kickstart. Thank you all very much, and I look forward to working with you in the future.